Welcome back to the Joe Rogan Experience. Tonight, relax and enjoy some of the most fascinating and mind-bending stories from the podcast, the kind that'll make you think, then help you drift off to sleep.
Top 10 terrifying UFO stories and government secrets exposed. 1 hour of shocking truth with Joe Rogan 2025.
What's the most compelling modern thing that you've seen?
Oh my God, I can't talk about it, unfortunately. This is my frustration, Joe, because I know what I've seen. I know what my colleagues have seen, right? And to this day, there's video that's coming in on a regular and routine basis that is very, very compelling. And if
how do they hide this stuff from the general public?
Well, we have classified systems. We hide a lot of
but
things.
how is it getting filmed? Is any of it getting filmed by the general public, or is all this military stuff?
So let me backtrack a little bit. There's a general public that is filming stuff, but from a Department of Defense perspective, our focus, now Aero is a different story, but when I was in the government, we had to be very, very careful of something we called intelligence oversight. Back in the 60s and 70s, the U.S. intelligence apparatus, particularly in the Department of Defense, was kind of naughty. They were doing things they shouldn't do. They were spying on students and they were spying on American citizens.
They were
doing things. Yeah,
crazy.
Right? Say it isn't so. So Congress passed some laws and said, okay, you can no longer do this kind of stuff on American citizens, right? You can't conduct intelligence operations on American citizens. You can't do it. It's illegal, right? Okay. So you have Executive Order 12333 and all these other rules and laws and DOD 5240.1 that all come out and say no mas. So Department of Defense is supposed to focus on military. That's it. You don't bring in U.S. persons' information and ingest them into a Department of Defense database, especially a Department of Defense intelligence database. That's a super no-no. That's called U.S. persons' information, and it's pretty much verboten. So our focus was looking specifically at military-sourced information. I was not focusing at all on what the private citizens were seeing because at the end of the day, we couldn't use it. You can't do anything with the data.
And it seems like you got plenty of compelling footage from the military.
Overwhelming. There's absolutely no doubt that we didn't have to look at civilian data because we had better collection sensor systems from the military that was looking at stuff and giving us better insight.
If you can't tell us about, can you give us some sort of an understanding of like what you're talking about?
Yeah, sure.
Without being specific?
Yeah, let me see. Okay, yeah. There is a video, high-resolution video, of I can't say what platform it was taken from. I can't say where it was taken from.
Okay.
But an object that, do you know how large an offshore oil derrick is? They're huge, right?
Yeah.
They're almost like a small city, right? They're like one city block. They're huge. They're enormous things. There is a video that shows one of these objects underwater that goes by. The speed was calculated between 450 and 550 knots underwater, and it was bigger than the offshore derrick that it was passing because you could see in the video the offshore derrick, and you could see this thing zip right by it.
Jesus.
Yeah.
So that's a lot of them, right? A lot of them are reported as being transmedium.
Right. So that exactly. Why do we use the term UAP, right? Now it's unidentified anomalous phenomenon because it's all domain. Initially it was UFO, unidentified flying object. And for several reasons they changed the name. One of them, not just because of stigma like people think, but because the word flying object means flight. And
right.
You have to have wings to fly. That's flight. And these things don't have wings. So that term, we're not even sure is even accurate anymore because they're not necessarily flying. We see them underwater. We see them super high altitude. So the term was changed to unidentified aerial phenomenon. But again, that did not encompass all the observations we were seeing. So now the term UAP, I think the latest description of it is unidentified anomalous phenomenon to help describe this multi-domain or transmedium characteristic that we are beginning to see and record that these things can do. And that is, I'm going to, if I can digress for a second, because that's super important, Joe. Mm-hmm. We have transmedium vehicles, right? We have things like seaplanes, and it's a plane and it can float on water. But let's face it, a seaplane is neither a really good plane or a really good boat because it's a compromise. It's a design compromise between an object that you want to perform in the air and in the sea. And that's why it's neither really good at both. same thing with, for example, the space shuttle. It goes out into space and it can glide down, but it's not a very good airplane, comes down like a brick,
Right.
because there's design compromises and performance compromises. But what we are seeing doesn't have any of that attributable compromise. It's not, these objects aren't slowing down. They're not changing their performance capabilities. They can do the same thing that we're seeing in the air and possibly in space and even underwater. So that is a fundamentally different type of technology than we are used to dealing with.
Is the assumption that they are doing something with space, time, and gravity around them rather than using something like a jet propulsion engine that blasts fire out the back and it makes it go fast forward?
Right.
That they're doing something that alters the gravity around them.
Yeah. So
and that's why they can go through everything.
Yeah. So we had some of the best scientists on the team, folks like Dr. Hal Puthoff and some other folks that I'm not allowed to say their names, Dr. Eric Davis and some others, that were doing the calculations, mathematical calculations on how this is possible. And the consensus was by the scientists, not me, because I'm not a physics expert, I'm not a astrophysicist. They were saying that. So let me back up here. Initially, the government for years was trying to identify the different exotic technologies that could explain the different performance characteristics. And it was during the ATIP years that the scientists had this consensus that if you had one type of technology, if you could do one thing, all these other observables now become possible. Kind of think of like a unifying theory. And so if you had the ability to create this bubble around you in a localized area that insulated you from the effects of Earth's gravity. Now, what is gravity? People think that, when I drop my glasses, that's gravity. That's not gravity. That's an effect of gravity. Gravity is the warping of space-time. And that's important because people you hear the term thrown around a lot, but they don't realize that space and time are actually connected. They are one and the same. They're opposite sides, if you will, of the same coin. And so you can't have one without the other. And so you have this ability to create a bubble around you that insulates you from the warping of space-time, let's say in this case Earth's gravity or something like that. Then the way you experience time inside that bubble is perhaps fundamentally different than the way you might experience space-time outside that bubble because you're not subject to the effects of gravity, which would explain potentially why things don't need wings and why they don't need propulsion systems like that, right? So it's a completely different way of looking at how we understand physics and how we as humans move about. Everything we do is fundamentally force equals mass times acceleration. Right? F equals ma, right? Mass times acceleration, and you get force. This may be something a little bit different. This is not using, again, conventional thrust, or if I Newtonian, right? If I push this way, I have an equal and opposite reaction that way, right? That's how.
Are there any theories as to how it's accomplishing this?
There is actually. Dr. Hal Puthoff about 3 years ago gave a speech on this. A very interesting lecture about this technology. And if you ever have the chance, you really should have him on because he's an incredible human being. He's also the one who helped start the government's remote viewing program and a bunch of other stuff for the government. He's been involved in a lot of our nation's probably most classified efforts. But he was working with us on ATIP as one of our scientists. And he gave a lecture about 3 years ago to some other scientists about the specifics on how this is possible. I am not a scientist, so I'm definitely not going to speak on behalf of Hal Puthoff because I'm sure I will muck it up. But I do recall a time when he came into our skiff and gave us about a 3-hour lecture on this unifying theory. And at that moment, it was very much for us the epiphany that a lot of us had been searching for. He's like, look, at the end of the day, this is how it's possible. And that was kind of this, wow. So it's really not.
Can you give us a
voodoo magic.
moron's view of how it's possible?
Yeah.
Explain it to someone like me.
Yeah, well, I'm in that category, Joe. So,
Good. We're speaking the same language.
Yes, sir. Yeah, single syllable grunts, right? Yeah. So you have an object like this cup on your table, and you want it to be insulated from the effects of Earth's gravity. So you create this bubble artificially using a certain energetic source. at a certain frequency, and it interacts with certain material, certain metamaterial, and I got to be careful exactly what I say, but certain skin of the craft, this aluminum via the cup here, and all of a sudden, whoop, you have this bubble around you where what you see on the outside is not necessarily what you see on the inside. In fact, may I do it one more drawing for you? Okay, and forgive me, I'm not an artist, so I'm going to do this upside down for you, and then I'm going to kind of scoot this just a little here. All right, let's do this. So, unfortunately, I know your audience can't see this, but actually,
That's
probably
okay.
good.
Some people can. There's a video form of it. Well, I'm sure this will get on. It'll be on YouTube as well.
It's probably good that they don't, because I'm not an artist. But
Okay.
let's say this is a two-dimensional representation of a three-dimensional space,
Okay.
and in essence,
So what you've done is essentially you created a three-dimensional looking grid stacked. It looked like stacked boxes on top of each other.
yeah, right. And so you have location A and location B, and let's say I go from Los Angeles to Baltimore.
Okay.
And it takes me 5 hours to fly at 500 miles an hour. That's a function of distance over time. And in essence, you can mark that linearly like this. So I fly, it takes me 5 hours, there I am.
Okay.
If you had the ability to compress space-time, and not a lot, just a little bit, and you were able to allow these points to be a little closer together, now in essence, what took you, let's say, 5 hours and 500 miles an hour to do it, you can do it in 1 hour, and you can do it in much less time. But to the observer outside, because we're still in the same universe, we would see something like that. We would see this incredible hopscotching ability to, if you will, take a shortcut through space-time. And so what would appear to be instantaneous acceleration, hypersonic velocity, and other things, now becomes a reality. And so that is fundamentally what these scientists had discovered. And so it seems like science fiction, but when you understand the mathematics and some of the theorem that they've proposed, a lot of these other observables become possible.
So these are essentially just theoretical explanations of how these things are moving.
Yeah, and I'm not a scientist.
I
I want to be
understand.
very careful. I don't want to misrepresent anything. There's a whole lot of other stuff that if you can do that, all of a sudden now makes sense and may describe the observations that people are seeing and why they're kind of hard to see and they seem obscure.
Right.
And so I think from a governmental perspective, that it was kind of a revelatory moment for the folks in our program.
So they realized one of the reasons why these things are weird looking is because they're creating. You want a light?
Do you mind? I'm sorry.
Yeah, take this.
Thank you.
So the back thing, the other side. Push that down. There you go. Bam.
Thank you very much.
No problem. So how much of this is theoretical and how much of this is observed from recovered vehicles?
I am not allowed to talk about what the government may or may not have in its possession, other than that so I went through a very lengthy Pentagon review process. Recently, I wrote, I won't talk about it here, but I wrote something, and I had to go through Pentagon to have a review process, and it took almost a year. In this thing I wrote, I talk about up to the part I can talk about, and they approved for me to talk about up to that point. When it comes to what the government may or may not have in its possession, all I can simply say is that there is very compelling evidence to suggest that the U.S. government is in absolute possession of exotic material that is not made by humans. Now, beyond that, I can't really expound upon. I haven't been given permission to talk about it. But what I can say is what I've already said for the record, which has been approved by the Pentagon. I won't get in trouble by saying it. Is that we are there's very compelling data to suggest that we are in possession of
Why is the
exotic material.
Pentagon teasing us? Why do they tell you? Why are they allowing you to say we are in possession of something that was not made by human beings, but not allowed to elaborate, not allowed to show these very compelling videos that you're talking about that you've seen?
I don't. Well, two reasons. I don't think they have a choice. I think with now the introduction of cell phones and Ring cameras, the cat's out of the bag. It's the worst kept secret at this point. Two, there is a faction, unlike before in the Cold War, I believe there is a faction of people inside the government that do want this conversation to occur. But equally, there's still a faction of people that are very mad with me.
What do you think of all this Pentagon UFO, we've recovered crafts, not of this world talk?
Okay, yeah, I think two things, I think, again, can always be true at the same time. I don't think we're the only intelligent life out there. I mean, I'm classifying us as intelligent. But I also don't think we're hiding some alien spacecraft somewhere.
So why do you think the Pentagon would come out and say something like that?
Well, I think, look, we did here comes a pitch for my show. For Black Files
what
Declassified.
Show is this?
That's Black Files Declassified.
Black Files Declassified? And how could one watch this show?
God, that was a good first season, wasn't it? It was on Discovery, on Science Channel.
Ah, I love Discovery. I love the Science Channel.
We did an episode on Advanced Aeronautic Threat and Identification Program, ATIP, which was the Pentagon's admitted, came out and said, yes, we have a program, that we ran a program. It's no longer in existence, called ATIP, which was designed to identify unidentified aviation threats, basically. So it's not talking about UFOs necessarily. It could be a hostile, prototype aircraft that, what is that?
I talked to Commander Fravor.
Yeah,
He's
you go,
the one.
David Fravor.
Yeah, David was in here,
Yeah.
and he explained his incident off of the coast of San Diego.
Mm-hmm.
And he said they tracked this thing. It dropped from 60,000 feet to 1 foot above the sea in a second.
Yeah. And it wasn't just him seeing this, right? It was the radar operators on board and his wingmen.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, but I think
they said it was tracking them, and then it actually actively blocked their tracking.
And then no visible means of propulsion.
Exactly. No heat signal.
Yeah. I mean, so I think look, and he's a very credible.
He's as credible
witness.
as it gets.
Yeah. Right. And so.
He's not the only one.
Yeah, not everything. I mean, but
what do you think of that?
Yeah, well, I think, I think we don't. Here's what I think. I think we haven't resolved that issue. We don't know. There was no final report that gave some sort of conclusive evidence that said this is what this this object was. It is considered still to this day to be an anomaly, perhaps, of, they just no clarification, which is interesting in all by itself. And again, kind of goes back to this, look, are we the only intelligent people? No. But do I think that the government is capable all these years of holding a secret like that? No, I really don't. I think there's much like with MK Ultra or anything else like it, eventually shit hits the fan, stuff comes out. And I don't think I'm not one of those, and I say this, and I'm sure a lot of people disagree, but I just don't think that the government's capable of keeping secrets for the long term, certainly not of this magnitude. But I think there are certainly things that have happened that we can't explain. And one of them would be the sighting by Fravor.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but materials that aren't from Earth, look, shit hits the Earth from space all the time, and that qualifies as a material that is not found.
That's not what they said, though.
Right. Well,
they said they've recovered crafts not from this world.
Yeah, I would want to sit down with the individual saying that and say, okay, clarify this, please.
I'd want to take him to one of them brothels.
Yeah, exactly. Absolutely. I sit there with a martini behind that mirror. Okay.
Hey, man, tell me what you really saw.
There you go. Bring one of those hookers in from the 60s. But no,
don't do that to her or him.
No.
I would want to know, though, what is actually happening, and why would they come out with a statement like that?
Well, I'm going to tell you something. This between you and me is second season of Black Files Declassified. We're going to be looking at that.
Why do you think?
I don't know what that's the big question is why would they say that?
Right.
And I don't have an answer for that. I don't know, and that's why I say
it's a shocker.
It definitely bears further investigation. That goes without saying.
If there was a thing that was coming, they would want to prepare people. And I think if you wanted to prepare people, the best way to prepare people is to slowly give them signs that some shit is about to go down. And one of the best ways to say, we have found things that are not of this world.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, think about that for a little while. We'll see you in a few months. a few months of accepting that without any. See, there's no event, right? It's just a statement.
What was the exact wording? Can we bring that up? Yeah, the exact wording of.
Here it is.
Yeah.
Crashes. Harry Reid said he believed crashes of vehicles from other worlds had occurred, and that retrieved materials had been studied secretly for decades.
Yeah.
Now Bob Lazar. Do you know the story of Bob Lazar? Bob Lazar was in here, and he said some things that were ridiculed, but turned out to be absolutely true. One of the things that he said was that there was this element 115, and that they had figured out a way to stabilize this element in these other planets, and that's what they used to propel these vehicles with a different kind of propulsion that manipulated gravity. And it essentially had created some sort of a warp where they weren't subject to the same laws of physics with this propulsion system that we are with what we have, which is just igniting fuel and pushing the explosion pushes the rocket into space.
Which could explain sort of the Fravor sighting.
Yeah, the way he described these vehicles in the 1980s and the early 1990s is exactly the way Fravor's vehicle worked. Exactly the way the gimbal video worked. These things, for whatever reason, they fly one way and then they turn sideways. Like if you had a plate, the plate turns up and down, and then that's the way it travels. And then somehow or another, that's how it travels insanely fast. That it does something to manipulate gravity around it.
Yeah.
It sounds super weird, but the fact that this guy talked about this in the early 90s, and then this is the exact video that the Pentagon refers to, that you actually see these objects that they can't explain, that don't give off a heat signal, that move in this exact same way at spectacular rates of speed. And then that's how the TikTok craft worked too.
Right. Well, I mean, there's a leap there necessarily that you got to make.
I don't want to make that leap either. I know what you're saying. For years, I was like, it's all horseshit.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not. Again, not saying it couldn't happen. I'm just saying there's certain parts of this, like okay, Harry Reid talking about it. Well, look, Harry Reid was he was very interested in this stuff. He allocated some federal funds to one of his buddies in Nevada to create a sort of a center, for examining this and for developing space exploration capabilities. So Harry Reid is certainly interested in this. I talked to Lou Elizondo, who ran ATIP, right? And you don't really get that answer when you say, okay, Lou, was ATIP holding on to materials, that came from a alien craft? No. What they're saying is
maybe it was an ATIP that was involved in that.
Maybe it was an ATIP. Yeah. No, that's that. Okay, yeah, I get that. And again, I guess what I'm saying is I'm open to say, yeah, fine. Look, anything's possible. I suppose in this world, things that I do know is I have a really hard time believing the government could keep this all buttoned up over a period of time.
And isn't there a genuine ridicule factor for coming forward that would help? I mean, that's a part of the whole things about all the UFO stories. They're so ridiculous.
Well, and that's why that's why they set up ATIP to begin with, right? Was so that they could have sort of a legitimate outlet and a place for this to go. But yeah, Fravor himself talks about it. Look, it's not in their best interest to get back on the carrier and say, by the way, we spotted an unidentified flying object.
Yeah.
But they did, and and you're right. So that's the natural tendency is to kind of look the other way or roll your eyes, and that can act as a deterrent. yeah, I don't know. But I do think that it bears further investigation. There's no doubt about that. And I think that the ATIP program that the Pentagon was running, for the minimal cost of that compared to the cost of another air asset or, a platform of some sort, I think they should have kept it going, right? And they should have normalized to some degree, because it's in our national security interest to know, have the Russians or have others developed materials, right, or propulsions. Everybody's working on new propulsion systems, right? Everybody that has the ability and the resources. So hypersonic craft, that's just coming, right? That's going to happen, and whoever wins that particular race is going to be further up the food chain than everybody else. So it's in our national interest to be exploring any legitimate or potentially legitimate sighting, to understand what that is. That doesn't mean you're chasing UFOs or sort of spacecraft from it just means you should know what the hell that is or what's out there. So I'm a big proponent of that. I'm just saying also you have to proceed with caution.
What do you think about all this stuff about, the New York Times had articles about it. There's Air Force test pilots have come out talking about encountering flying saucers. Mm-hmm. Or unidentified flying objects, particularly Commander Fravor, who had that
David
tic-tac thing.
Yep.
Yeah. What do you think about all that?
Yeah, we do. I'm a shameless marketer. We do an episode on that, on ATIP, on the Advanced Aviation Threat Identification Program. And look, again, I always say the same thing. I'm not a conspiracy guy. I tend to be very cynical about everything, but. After talking to some of these folks, including Fravor and a handful of others who were both pilots and also were involved in the ATIP program for the U.S. government, for the military, there's things out there that we haven't been able to identify, right? And I'm not jumping on the alien train, right, necessarily. But what I'm saying is that there are things that extremely experienced pilots, military pilots with significant amounts of experience couldn't figure out, couldn't identify, right? And so I'm certainly not going to be smart enough to say, okay, this is what it was. Was it a foreign government's experimental aircraft? Was it something? I don't know. But what I do know is that the U.S. government took it seriously enough that they developed their own internal program within the Pentagon to try to sort out the wheat from the chaff, right, and say, okay, what do we actually have to worry about? In part because it's a national security issue, right? If there is a aircraft or if there's something up there that a military pilot sees, for instance, that they can't identify, all right, well, we have an obligation to figure out what that is, because if it's a hostile foreign government's efforts to develop, craft that we don't know about or propulsion systems we don't know about, then yes, we should be working on that issue. The problem has always been that once you talk about that, then people immediately go, oh, aliens, huh? Area 51, and it kind of gets dismissed. Yeah. But there was a much more serious effort than I knew about before I started working on this thing. And so I don't know. I think I've got an open mind about that. It's like that old thing about how can we really be the only people out here, right? Or life forms out here. I don't know. That seems a little obscure for me to believe.
It seems unrealistic.
Yeah. So, but
when a guy like Fravor, that's the thing. When someone who's that rock solid comes out and tells the story, and he's not deviating from his story. He's not a guy who's trying to make money. He's just, and he doesn't have a history of telling fantastic stories.
And he knew what it meant when he was going to come forward and talk about this. And you've got the gun cameras, and you've got the radar operators who also saw the same thing.
They saw it, and they said it was actively jamming their radar. Yeah. Which they said, what the fuck? And then the way it moved from 60,000 feet down to like 200 feet in like less than a second. Yeah,
and no signs of any propulsion system.
Yeah.
No, there's several things about that leave you scratching your head. Again, I'm not making a case one way or the other. The point of this is to kind of use the money trail as a way to get inside some of these programs, and then to the degree that you can, without to the degree that you can talk about things that are declassified. Not necessarily try to make a case. We're not trying to say it is this or it is that, but I think we're presenting a lot of interesting information that, again, with this situation with Fravor as an example, you come away from it and you think, okay, I'm not dismissing anything at this point. Just it would be I think foolish to or anyway. So interesting stuff. But
was that ever anything that came up during your career?
No. I was pretty much straightforward. Pound the ground through some counterinsurgency operations, counter-narcotics, counterterrorism operations. We never did any counter-alien things. So right, that must have been that was a different operation. That was on a floor we weren't allowed to go onto at the headquarters.
Seems like if we had to admit it was real, if it was something that was real, and we were being contacted on a regular basis, or at least a semi-regular basis, that would change the way everybody feels about everything.
Yes.
Remember when Reagan gave that speech?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I think it was the United Nations. He said, imagine how easily we would come together if we were faced with a threat from an alien world.
Right.
And everybody was like, oh my God, he knows something.
Yeah.
The aliens.
He's about to spill the beans.
Yeah, that's what we were hoping.
No,
all the UFO dorks like myself.
Well, but think about it. I mean, think if that did come out, which is what part of the allure, right, is the idea that, the government's been keeping this from us for all these years, and you think about what that would mean, not just obviously, oh my God, really, there's something going on out there, but then sort of that breakdown in trust, not that it's not happening already in terms of the government and its ability to, play square. But, look, Area 51. Area 51 was scouted out for use as an experimental, test site for aircraft. And, it made perfect sense. Well, then you get all these experimental aircraft being developed out there and flown, some successfully, some not. And, locals, see this shit, locals being a fairly good-sized region because of the distance on these. And, it's understandable how you start getting some of these stories. But, having said that, I sat down with Fravor, right? We talked about this a lot for this one episode, and I talked to several others. And, again, I come away and I'm not sure what to think, but again, I'm not closing the book on anything at this point.
See, the way I looked at it is if these were unique expeditions from another planet, or whatever it is that comes here, some alien spacecraft, all they'd have to do is come here once or twice.
Get fed up.
Well, not even that, but I used to have a bit about it, how Earth is the Tijuana of outer space. They only come down here when they're fucked up and they want to see a show. That's why they don't stay. They just come down and they go, what the fuck? Like, no one's doing any science expeditions to Tijuana.
I'm not going back there. No way. Not unless I'm drunk again.
Yeah. Well, I was just thinking that if they were going to come down here and examine us, I mean, they could just do it a couple of times and people have these stories and everybody else dismisses it like, where are they? Where are they? I don't see any aliens. Yeah. Because you really wouldn't. And you probably don't. If they're capable of moving at the speed that Fravor described, where it was just impossible to track with the human eye.
They're not going to view us as a threat.
No.
Yeah. They're not going to.
They think we're a threat. I think they're just, I don't know.
They're not going to look at us and say, we want to steal their technology.
It's the most fascinating thing to me. Out of all the weird what ifs and who could do this and how could that be true, the alien one is the most fascinating. Because if that was real, and if we somehow or another one day get some undeniable proof, like the Fravor film, the film footage, the gunner footage, the radar footage, that's pretty goddamn compelling. But man, if there was something like off the chart. So what year was your incident? And you have a very, very famous incident that's corroborated by actual evidence, which is one of the rare ones. What year was it, and where did it take place?
So it was 2004, November 14th. It's really, if you draw San Diego to Ensenada, Mexico, we're about 60 miles off the coast in between the two. We're doing workups, so when we get ready to deploy, this was for the 2005 deployment. We were going at sea for November and December of 2004. So we had been out. I had just taken over the squadron mid-October, so I'd been the CO for a month. So we go out and we're putting the battle group pieces together. So it's not just the air wing, but we're on the carrier. We've got the cruiser. We've got all the support ships out there, and we're going to integrate all the defenses and train as one unit. So the exercise that we're going to do is an air defense exercise where there's good guys, bad guys. They're all from the air wing. So the bad guys today are going to be the Marines, VMFA 232, the Red Devils. So they're going to launch, and they're going to go about 100 miles south of the ship, and we're the good guys, and we call it a 2v2, so it's two of us against two of them. And we're going to work with the USS Princeton, which is going to be the controller, and they're going to control the blue forces, and then the red guys are going to give us a presentation that they're going to try and intercept so we can stop them from getting up towards the carrier. So that's kind of the training set that we're all good. So the Marines take off first, and they start heading to the south. Now, we have no idea that for 2 weeks, the 2 weeks we've been at sea, they've been tracking these things coming out of the sky. And when I talked to the Princeton controller, he's like up to about a dozen of them. They would come down from above 80,000 feet. They'd drop down to about 20,000 feet. They'd hang out, and then they'd go straight back up after about 3 or 4 hours.
Now, when you say they've been tracking them, who specifically?
This is the USS. The Princeton was tracking them. They saw them on the Nimitz radar, and the E-2 could see them. Because they're out there, that radar's on all the time. And the Spy 1 system on an Aegis cruiser is, the state-of-the-art. It's probably one of the most sophisticated systems in the world.
So typically when something like this happens and there is some unexplained phenomenon, what do they do?
In this case, if we were in a threat environment, they would tell us. But we're off the coast of San Diego. It doesn't come to the air wing. So we have no idea that these things are out there at all.
So they observe these things, and they never bother telling any of you guys.
That's correct.
So they just knew that these things had been visiting this area,
yes.
But they just allowed this training exercise to take place anyway.
Yeah, talking to them, for the 2 weeks, they would show up, but it was when we weren't flying. So the typical carrier schedule is, for us, it was about noon to midnight. It's a 12-hour day. There's reasons for that. It can go a lot longer. But for training, we just do the 12-hour day thing. And it's cyclic ops, so you got guys taking off and landing periodically. So we were on one of the first goes. It's noon, 1 o'clock, somewhere around there, and we take off. The Marines take off first, and my buddy Cheeks, who's the CO of the Marine Squadron, he was leading the Red Air. When he launched off the carrier first, they called him up and said, "Hey, what do you got on board?" Well, the original legacy F-18s don't have as much gas as the Super Hornets. Super Hornet's about 30% bigger. So they start talking to him about fuel, and based on how long we're going to be airborne and everything else, they go, "Hey, why don't you just go ahead and proceed to your cap point?" Because we had just taken off. And that's when the controller had come up and said, "Hey," I forget our call sign. It's probably like dealer is usually what we went. So it'd be like dealer 11. This is Princeton Control. What do you got? Say your loadout. And I kind of chuckled. I said, well, I got a CATM 9, which is basically just a blue metal tube with a seeker head for an AIM-9 IR missile. It's a training. It doesn't come off the airplane. You can beat it with a sledgehammer. That's the only way you're going to get it off, or you got to unlock the lugs with a key. So I'm like kind of chuckling. He goes, "Well, hey, we're going to cancel the training." So we're like, okay. He says, "We got real world vector, and they're going to send us out to the west." So picture if it's, if you got a clock, the Nimitz is in the middle. We're a little bit south of that, about 40 miles south, and then the Marines are about 100 miles south of the ship, about 60 miles between the two of us. So as this is all happening, my wingman is joining up, and these are F-18Fs, so there's 2 people in each jet. So it's me and my Wizzo, which is a weapon systems operator, and I've got the other pilot and the weapon systems operator in the other jet. So they tell us all this, hey, we're going to real world vector, and they send us out 270, about 60 miles away from where we're going. So now we're going out even further out to sea. We have no idea what we're intercepting, and this is when the controller starts talking to us. He says, "Hey, sir, we've seen these objects. For 2 weeks, they've been coming down," and he's giving us the whole story. He says, "We need you to go investigate. We want to know what these are." So,
but they're asking you to investigate in a jet that's unarmed.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah, we have no... And there's reasons for that we don't fly. We typically don't fly with live ordnance unless we're actually going into like a combat zone or we're on a training range and we're going to shoot something. And the reason is you can go through history of the Navy or Air Force. If you put live missiles on airplanes and then you start doing training where you're squeezing the trigger, someone always messes the switchology up and someone gets shot down. It's happened multiple times. So we don't do it. There's times that we do, but it's rare. So we start flying out to the west. Now I want you to think, because the other pilot has when you talk to, it's out there, it was a female. When you talk to her, here's the kind of goes through the mindset of, hey, we're off the coast of Mexico, real world vector. We have no idea what we're going to look at. Probably drug runner, because you get the drug runners coming up the coast. So we're like, okay. So we drive out, and they're calling down ranges. So they're telling us, hey, it's 270 at 30 miles at 20,000 feet. And it's, and then you just count down the ranges. And we're talking back and forth the whole time. So they got to a point where they say, hey, merge plot, which means radars have resolution cells, range and azimuth of what the radar can actually see. Once you're inside that box, you can't tell the difference between me and the object I'm going at. We're just become one big blob. So they call merge plot, and so the other jet is on my left-hand side, and and I'm gonna go to a clock code to make it simple. So the object we're gonna end up looking for is right in the middle of the clock, and we are at the 6 o'clock position, and my wingman is off to my left side, so she's further down with her Wizzo. So as we're looking around, we look to the right, and yesterday was a perfect example out here. The water is perfectly calm, no white caps. I mean, it's literally a perfect San Diego, California day. And we see whitewater, something like if you see a seamount, rock underwater when you're standing on the shore and the waves are breaking over it, and you're like, what is that? It's usually because there's a rock under the water. So it looks like that, but it's about the size of a 737. It actually kind of has a shape of like a cross, and it's pointing to the east. So you've got the long part going east-west, and you got a couple of things going north and south. So as we're looking at it, because that kind of draws our eyes, we're like, oh, that's kind of odd. We look down, and the Wizzo in the other airplane comes up and says, hey, skipper, do you? And that's about what he gets out of his mouth. And I'm kind of looking at the same thing. I go, dude, do you see that? What is that thing? And what we see is this white tic-tac looking object just above the surface of the water, pointing north-south, and it's going north-south, east-west. It's just radically moving forward, back, left, right at will. And it's moving around the disturbance, the whitewater that we see.
How big is this thing?
So, over time, it's about 40 feet long. And the way I estimate that is, I got a lot of time fighting other airplanes, so it's about the size of a Hornet fuselage. So that's why you say 40 feet. And this thing's just going left. So the first thing you see when you look down, you go, and this is with our eyes, it's not sensors, right? So we're looking down at this thing, and first thing you think is helicopter, right? Helicopters typically stay below 200 feet when we're out there, and they're just driving around. We're pretty far away from the ship for a helicopter for one of ours. So what is it? So the first thing you look for is rotor wash. If you've watched any TV show that starts kicking the water up, and you can see that it's really easy to see from the air. So we're like, no rotor wash. Matter of fact, don't see any rotors. Don't see any tail rotor. Don't see any, the main rotors. We're like, that's kind of weird. So as we're driving around, we're looking at this thing. We get to about the 9 o'clock position.
How far away are you from this thing?
I'm at 20,000 feet, and it's right down on the surface, right off our right side. So I'm probably maybe a couple miles lateral and 20,000 feet, and we're just watching it move around. And
so it's very small in your eyes.
Not overly small. An airplane down that low, it's 40 feet. You can see pretty well. It was pretty clear. So I'm like, okay. So I said, I'm gonna go check it out. That's what we're trained to do. The other pilot says, hey, I'm gonna stay up here, and I'm like, that's perfect. So now we'll get some separation. We'll get it from different views, and the other airplane will kind of have a God's eye view of everything that's going on as I go down and check this thing out. So I start driving around, and it's still doing its forward, back, left, right. It's still pointing north-south. We get to about the 12 o'clock position. I'm just in a nice, easy descent. And a reason, because I've been asked, could you go more aggressive? You can, but when you're out over water, the water looks the same at 20,000 feet as it does at 2,000 feet. You don't, so you can easily put yourself in a non-recoverable position if you're not paying attention and you go into the water. So I got this nice, easy descent. I get to about 12 o'clock, and as I'm coming down, I could guess probably about 18,000 feet now, a couple thousand feet below the other airplane. The tic-tac just kind of rapidly goes boop and turns, so now it's kind of pointing east-west, and now it mirrors us. So it's above the surface, we're up high, we're coming down, it starts coming up. I'm like, well, this is getting interesting. So we kind of drive all the way around a circle, I'm descending, it's coming up, and I get over to about the 8 o'clock position on the clock, and it's over at about the 2 o'clock position. Well, the quickest way, as we know as kids, to get someone, you can keep going around the circle. Nothing's going to happen. You cut across the circle. So I'm about, probably 2,000 to 3,000 feet above it, and I just kind of drop my nose aggressively, and I cut across the circle, and it's coming this way. It's because I'm trying to fly to where it's going to be, because I want to join on it. I want to see how close I can get to it.
Right.
And as I'm pulling up, it's kind of starting to cross my nose, and it starts to accelerate, and within about less than a second, as I start to pull nose onto it and it crosses right in front of me, it just goes poof and it's gone. So I call the other airplane and I said, hey, do you guys see that thing? And they're like, sir, it's gone. We don't see it at all. So I'm like, okay, that's kind of weird. So we don't see it. We're looking. At the same time, I say, hey, let's turn around and let's go back to see what was in the water. Was there something there? So we turn around. We're right there. We haven't gone anywhere. It's gone. Water's perfectly, there's no white water, nothing. It's just blue. We're like, okay. So we turn back around. Now we're heading back out towards the east. And I tell the controller, I first said, I'm kind of weirded out. And I told my backseater that. And we start heading back, and the the controller on the Princeton comes up and he says, "Sir, you're not going to believe this, but that thing is back at your cap point." That was our original point where we were going to hold 40 miles south of the ship. So this thing has went from wherever we were at to, about 60 miles in, maybe 30, 40 seconds. It's already over there. And and they didn't track it. It just appeared. It shows back up on their radar and they go, "It's here." So we're like, okay. So we fly back. We don't see it. We don't see it on our radar. We don't see it on any of our sensors. We do like 2 runs and we come back to the ship and land. So as we're in we call it the PR shop. We're taking off our flight gear. One of my crews is getting ready to go out, and I think they were going to be on a tanker mission, but they had a targeting pod on board. So they launch off, and we're telling them about this before, and the backseater, Chad, says he's really determined he's going to find this thing. So he tells the pilot, "Hey, we're going to find this thing." So they're just out driving around, and in the back seat of a Super Hornet, there's no stick, but there's side stick controllers, and they're to control the sensors, because that's what the weapon systems guys do. And they can change displays really fast by just hitting a button, and it'll flip from the radar to the targeting pod. And the way the system actually works is when you see something on the radar and you designate it as your primary target, all the other sensors will look at that point. So everything is kind of synced together. So he picks up a hit on his radar, and he goes to lock it up, because I've watched all the tapes. He goes to lock it up, and immediately the radar can tell, it gets signals back that it's being jammed. So, and technically jamming is an act of war. It starts jamming the radar, goes into a jam extrapolate, a bunch of stuff happens on the scope. Well, he's smart enough to castle to his targeting pod, and he takes a passive track, and that's the video that you see of the Tic Tac, where it's just sitting in the middle of the screen real quiet. So he does that, and he goes through. If you watch the video, if we had it, I'd go through it with you. But they go through all the different modes. So he goes, it's an IR and an EO. EO is TV. It's black and white TV camera.
We can get the video right online.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, let's get the video, Jamie. Where would you? Can't show it to anybody. We can't show it on YouTube, but you can see it, and people will be able to go to it. You know what we'll do? Go to the video. And we'll tell people when we're starting, and we'll tell people what the title of the video that you get to is, and they can sync it up themselves if they're watching it.
It's publicly owned. Sorry.
Yeah.
It's publicly owned. It's, American government released
Right.
it. So it is actually something in the public domain.
So you think we could play it on YouTube and not get pulled?
Yeah.
100%.
You think so, Jamie?
It's a government.
Those things, I would say, yes, we should be able to, but sometimes those things get messy. So
Let's take a chance.
Okay,
Let's take a chance with this one.
Okay, all right.
I know if you find a New York Times article, there's a link to it.
It's a Pentagon release.
YouTube is crazy with copyright stuff, and we've always been like 2 steps away from getting pulled off of YouTube completely. It's a real disaster. I understand from their perspective. There's a lot of legal issues they have to deal with, but
I have it on a private server. I could maybe send Jamie.
the issue, I believe, though, is the actual copyright of the video itself.
Oh, it's a Pentagon
Pentagon
release
released public
Okay,
domain.
and the Pentagon's going to come after us.
video. I don't think so.
I
But
don't think so either. Did you find it?
Yeah, I want to find a good version of the video that doesn't have somebody
Jeremy,
else's
do you
copyright.
know?
Yeah, I've got
Okay.
an unwatermarked version. Let me just look it
Yeah,
up and
this one
send it
has
to you.
tons of
Jeremy will
watermarks
get
all
it
over
to us.
I have to figure out how to send it to you right here. Give me a second.
Do you have AirDrop? Or could you AirDrop it?
Yeah, but
Do
I
you
got
have
it on
copy of
a page. I got it on a page, a private page. I can send Jamie.
Oh yeah, okay.
Okay.
Okay. Do you have Jamie's info?
No.
Yeah,
Send it.
I'll write it down.
Okay, I'll figure it
Or
out.
you can
what
send
guys
it to me and I'll send it to him.
Okay.
That's pretty easy. Sorry to disrupt the momentum.
No, you're good.
But I think it's probably important to be able to have this the video itself, so you could just talk about it. And we're about to yank it up here. Okay, Jamie wrote it down for you. There you go.
Thanks. Give me a second to get it up.
Okay. And for people who don't know, Jeremy also produced Bob Lazar, Area 51 and Flying Saucers, and he was in here when we had Bob Lazar in, talk about Bob's experience, and Jesus, if that wasn't a game changer for me and for a lot of other people. This is a subject that it's so easy to mock. This is why I think it's so important that we talk to people like you, because like I said, just your average everyday UFO crackpot, they believe everything and anything. Had you ever had any UFO experiences before this?
No, the irony, and I tell this story. My mother-in-law, she'll be listening. She literally every time I would go home, she would ask me, "Hey, did you see UFO? Did you see UFO?" And I'd be like, "No." And when I first started dating my wife, she was a big like National Enquirer. She had all the supermarket tabloids, and I would always just feed her crap for it. So this happens, and I never say a word. So my friends all knew it was a great story over beers because they'd go, "Hey, what's the coolest thing you ever saw flying?" I go, "I chased a UFO," and they go, "Get out of here!" I go, "No, seriously," and I tell them the story, and they're like, "Dude," I go, "Yeah." So I go home, and I got asked by Lou Elizondo to do the New York Times article, which, as like anything else, I always say no. Like, it took a bunch of times to get me on your show. Jeremy kept asking, and it was...
Thank you, Jeremy.
You got to thank my contractor's wife, Angel, who we were at a party drinking, and she goes, "You got to do Rogan." I go, "What?" She goes, "It's the biggest podcast on the planet." She goes, "You got to do it." And I go, "All right, I'm going to do it. Just for you, I'm going to do this show." So
shout out to Angel.
Yeah, from New Hampshire. So... So my mother-in-law, we're sitting there, and I know the New York Times article is going to come out, and so it was at Thanksgiving in when the article came out, 17. So it was Thanksgiving in 2017, and everyone had kind of left the house, so it's just my wife and my in-laws. A couple of us sitting in the kitchen, and I said, "Hey, I got to tell you guys this." They said, "What?" I said, "There's going to be this article comes out in the New York Times, and I'm in it." And they're like, "Yeah." I go, "Well, I chased a UFO." My mother-in-law's like, "Ha ha." She looks at my father-in-law. He's rolling his eyes, looking at me like, "Oh, are you serious?" And I go, "Yeah, oh, yeah." And she's like, "You never told us." I go, "I never really told anyone." I mean, my wife and kids knew the event happened, but they didn't have all the details because it's just one of those things I just didn't get into.
Is it classified?
No.
Or was it at any point in time?
No, there's a lot of rumors out there that it was classified and the ship got locked down. No, it wasn't. It was, we were never, men in suits did not show up. No one told us not to talk about it. And this is because there's a lot of other people saying other things. And I said, look at it. Here's the context. So in the battle group, you've got the admiral, you got the captain of the ship, the captain of the Princeton, and then you've got the other COs. So in position-wise, I'm probably, as a CO of a squadron, in the top 20 out of 6,000. And no one came to talk to me. No one came to take my tapes. No one showed up in a suit. No one told me not to talk. No one talked to any of my air crew that were involved in this. There were 6 people total involved, the 2 that shot the video and the 4 of us that looked at it for 5 minutes with our eyes. No one, nothing. It just, and I can get into how, there's a report that George Knapp got released. I call it the unofficial official report. And I had met someone, and I'm like, "Hey, can you find anything out? I had this incident." And normally you tell people this, they look at you like, "Dude, what are you smoking?" And I'm like, no, I'm good. I'm tested. And they go, and they said, "Well, let me see what I can do." And I had got a call. I was doing some aerospace work, and I had gotten a call on my cell phone from a guy. And he said, "Hey, I want to investigate your incident." And I go, "Okay." So he did. He investigated the incident, and it was very, very thorough. I mean, if you've read it's about 10 pages long. And he tracked down everybody. He tracked down all the people that were the air crew that were involved. He tracked down the admiral. It was a pretty thorough report. And I didn't think anything of it, because the people worded it's out there, so they want to do FOIA, but it was never released in a FOIA request. I actually had the Navy call me. I'd been out of the Navy for like 6 years. And
let's explain to people that means Freedom of Information Act.
So I got called by a public affairs person from the Navy and said, "Hey, is this Commander Fravor?" And I said, "Yeah." And they said, "Hey, do you know of any documentation on your UFO incident off the Nimitz?" And I said, "Official." And she said, "Yeah." I said, "No," because I knew the report existed, but to me it was an unofficial because I didn't know where it went. I had a copy of it, but because it wasn't official, well then years later I find out that the guy who actually did the report was part of the ATIP team, and I was talking to Lou Elizondo, who runs that program, and Lou showed me the documentation of the original. I think it's like 13 people that were part of ATIP, and they were FOIA exempt. And I'm like, well, that's hey, I know that guy. He's the guy that did the report, which is why it never ever came out until George got his hands on it.
How is something Freedom of Information Act exempt?
Obviously, DOD has the ability, because I'm not a conspiracy theory person at all. I mean, I'll just tell you that. And I think there's reasons that the government doesn't tell the public everything. And I don't speak for the government, but I think there's a good reason for that not everything needs to go out to the public. But most of it does. And what they do is they put a clause on, hey, for this program or whatever we're doing, which would have been an ATIP program, the work that they do and what they find it's not releasable through Freedom of Information Act. There's probably other avenues to get that. And then you go, well, what really is freedom of information? Because I got into this I was talking to someone who's a conspiracy theorist, and they said, well, so-and-so wrote, and they're not getting any information on your event. I said, so what are they going to do? They're going to call up, you're going to put in your request for freedom of information. You go, here's what I want. It goes to some poor guy at the Pentagon who's like, I have no idea what this is. And he searches around. He doesn't find anything. He looks at his bud, and I go, for you, I go, hey, Joe, you got anything on the Nimitz incident? And you go, nope. And I go, okay, well, I didn't find anything. I looked. I did my due diligence, but I'm not going to spend the next 6 months of my life doing your research project for you.
Right.
So and you get nothing, and then you assume the government's covering up when the
Got
government
it.
really isn't. They just, the guys doing the research doesn't know where it's at or
Makes
doesn't have
sense.
access to it. So.
Makes sense. Jamie, we have the video? Okay. Here we go. Now, explain what are we seeing and why are we seeing it in this particular
Okay,
shade?
so we'll just kind of go around. So if you look at the OPRs operate in the top left corner. NAR is narrow field of view, which is zoomed in. IR at the top middle, it means it's in infrared mode. So instead of seeing color, you're seeing temperature variations.
Okay.
And these things are extremely sensitive to in like tenths of degrees. They will tell you the difference due to color. So it'll go from black to white. So in this case, white is hot. So if you look down in the bottom left corner, it says WHT. That's white. That means white is hot. So the object that you're looking at is hotter than the sky around it. But what you also notice is there's no plumes. Now, if you're looking at an airplane, when you get closer, you'll actually see the exhaust coming out, and there will be a really glowing plume. That's important as we look at the video. And then most of the stuff on here you really don't need to know. What you can look at is the bottom right corner. It says 19,990 and a B. That's the altitude. And if you look up in the little words where it says HDG and then BALT, it's autopilot. So it's on altitude hold. It's just flying for that. So you can go ahead and play the video. And so those two bars next to the white object, that's a passive track. So what he's done is he's commanded the FLIR to track that. So what the system does is it uses, it's actually tracking, it can track pixels, and it's just basically blocked those hot pixels, those white pixels from the black ones. And then you're going to see now, pause it real quick. So up at the top, see it went to a white screen with the black object. This is a black and white TV mode. And if you look at the top, it says TV. So narrow in TV mode is actually, you can get closer than narrow in IR. It's literally narrow in IR is about medium in TV mode. So you can get closer with the TV mode. So as you look at it now, in this case, you would actually start to see stuff going on. And even in TV mode, because you get exhaust, the black exhaust that comes out, you'll usually be able to see kind of some of that coming out of the back, and you don't see anything. This thing's just sitting there. And if you look at the top where it says 3 right, that's the pod is looking 3 degrees right of the nose of the airplane, right? So he's just flying along. The bottom numbers, don't worry, those are time. So it's 41:56. So go ahead and hit play. And what he's doing is Chad's going through all the different modes because he's like, oh, I got it. And he's going to try and see the best video that he can get. Now, there's rumors that this video is like 10 minutes long. No, what you're looking at is the entire video. Now, notice where it says 99.9. So hit pause real quick. What that means is while he's got the targeting pod, because that's his primary sensor right now, the radar is still trying to look at this object and trying to range it, and the radar can't get ranging on it. So the object is doing something to say, I'm not giving you back, because it's just a Doppler radar, just like a police radar is a Doppler. It's trying to get a ranging on you, and it can't do it. So when it says 99.9, the radar cannot see this object right now. It's not allowing it to get ranging.
And I think that's super important, Dave, the way he explained it to me. Active jamming compared to passive jamming. This is a technology that is actively jamming this system.
Rather than something like stealth aircraft, which is the shape and the texture of the...
Yeah, it's... Because everyone thinks stealth is invisible. It's not. It's a technology to basically make it harder for radars to see you. And that's the whole thing. If you look at airplanes that are nose on are harder to see than airplanes at the sides. Kind of like think of a barn door. If you're looking at the whole barn door, it's really easy to see. If I turn the barn door sideways where it's really thin, it's going to be a lot harder for you to see it.
Got it.
So that's the easiest, most basic way to look at this. So keep going. You can play again. And you can look, the airplane is still sitting at 20,000 feet. It's doing 250 knots. He's going to go through different modes and try and lock it. And it's just kind of sitting, and all of a sudden, as the video goes on, I think it's a minute and a half long. See, it's going to try and reacquire. It recenters the pod. So it's slowly drifting to the left. The Hornet is still going the same heading, just kind of hanging out. And they're just filming this thing. And then when they get close, it's going to zing off the left-hand side. When you see it on a full, because this, you think digital, you'd be able to get a 1-for-1 copy. Unlike, when you copy your album to a cassette, you lose a little quality. Well, you still do in digital world, and off it goes to the left. And that's pretty fast to leave that field of view. When we have big monitors that we look at these when they come back, so we're looking at the original tapes. So
play the end of that again, please, Jamie. So when it's taking off, how fast, when it just sort of like leaves the field of view and takes off to the left, how fast is that going?
I would say pretty fast. It's an estimate. If we had ranging, you could obviously do the triangle and go, hey, because we know how big the field of view is. But for something to leave the field of view that fast with the pod just staring is pretty fast. I mean, it's like out of here.
Like nothing that we have?
No, because we can't. I don't care what airplane is. So let's just use the F-22 Raptor. That's probably it's probably the best airplane in the world right now, performance-wise. It can't take off like that, especially if it's a hover. I mean, you're talking something that's just sitting in space in the wind, and then it just all of a sudden accelerates. Airplanes don't work that way.
And it's not leaving any exhaust plume.
No, notice there's none. And when
Play
you
it
go back
again,
to the
Jamie,
IR
at the end.
Even in the IR, you don't.
Yeah, see, there's IR zoomed in, and there's no. You would see a plume if that was an airplane.
It's creepy how it takes off.
Yeah.
With active jamming, it's intelligently controlled. There's no rotors, there's no plumes, there's no exhaust, there's no tail fin, there's no tail number. This thing goes from a standstill, takes off. It's a propulsion system we don't have in our inventory, and no other nation does. That's how it's understood by the government.
Now that's so if the fastest plane on Earth was trying to do that same maneuver, this system would be able to track it?
Yeah, it would stay with it until it got to the limits of the pod, as far as looking to the left. But
right.
And the radar would see it. I mean, when you get close enough, you're gonna, everything becomes visible because you get burned through with radar and how radars actually work. This one is, you tell me, but this was performance beyond. I mean, it's like when we saw it disappear when it flew in front of my nose. I'm talking something, I'm within a half mile of it, looking at it. And it gets in front of me and just disappears. So we'll just go to something that everyone knows is fast. Let's just say SR-71 that's doing Mach 3. The visibility is 50 miles. So even at 35 miles a minute, I'm going to be able to see this thing turn into a little dot as it goes off into the horizon for probably a minute. The thing that we saw disappeared in a second. Just gone. And that's from two different angles. Remember, the other airplane's 8,000 feet above me because we get close to it at about 12,000 feet. So the other airplane's above me looking down, and when it disappeared, I said, "Do you guys see it?" And they said, "No, it's gone." It just literally was poof.
Last time I saw you, I don't think the Pentagon had come out because it was actually during the pandemic where the Pentagon came out. I don't think we talked about this last time, did we?
I don't think so.
Where
no.
they said they've recovered alien crafts. They said, we have recovered crafts that are not from this world.
Is that exactly what they said?
Pull it up, young
Pull
Jay.
that up. That exact quote from
It's a sketchy.
the Pentagon.
It's
The
it's
Pentagon
actually
didn't say it, yeah.
that was the guy from Vegas, the guy from Nevada. What is his name? Was he a senator from Nevada?
Harry
Reid.
Harry Reid,
Someone that
former senator.
Pentagon former contractor was the one that said it. I
Oh,
believe
you're
is how
thinking
it
of
said it.
you're thinking of he's got an aerospace business out there that was funded in part by taxpayer money. That it was a sort of a pet project of Harry Reid's in a sense. I'm struggling to remember the guy's name. I should remember it because we've talked about it.
Lear?
No. Aerospace buddy of Harry Reid's. Can we Google
Is that the Skinwalker Ranch guy?
No. This is this guy is. They've actually still got a business. He's still developing right now. I think what he's trying to do is develop portable living.
Yeah, that is a Skinwalker Ranch
operations.
guy.
That is right.
Yeah.
Okay. Sure.
That is the guy. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I know who you're talking about.
Yeah.
The name's on the tip of my tongue.
I know. But if he's the one who said it, then it doesn't come from the government. They the ATIP, which is that Advanced Aeronautical Threat Identification Program.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think the most interesting thing that the government has come out and said is that yes, we did have an operation within the Pentagon, an office within the Pentagon. I've taught that was there to identify unidentified threats.
Mm-hmm.
Right, so we get something up in the air and we can't identify it. It's like the Tic Tac sightings by
David
Fravor.
Fravor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And those guys. So
David Fravor, for anybody who's interested in this, please listen to him on the Lex Friedman podcast, because I had him on, but I had him on with Jeremy Corbell, who's the documentarian behind that Bob Lazar movie, and by himself, Fravor and Lex, they get deep into the technical specifications of their aircraft and why he believes that no known aircraft could have ever operated the way it is, and also how it was blocking their tracking devices, which is technically it's an act of war, but also it showed that it was aware of them.
yeah, he's very credible. I mean,
Yes.
he's extremely credible. He's a good guy. I've talked to him a handful of times. I've sat and reviewed the gun camera footage with him as he's walked through it. Very credible, right? So that was a perfect example of why they had set up ATIP, right, within the Pentagon. Apparently not funded anymore as an operating office.
Because they probably got some new shit that they can't tell you about,
Yeah,
because
exactly.
that one got out there.
Got to close it down.
That's in the New York Times
that's
already.
What you do.
That is what they do, right?
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
I mean, or you reallocate the. It's all in the budgets, which is again kind of why we do this show for Science Channel called Black Files, because we're chasing the
We
budgets.
finally got to that.
I know, right?
Jesus
Right?
Christ.
I know.
We're
I got
2 hours
like,
in.
I got like 2 other promos to do. I haven't even touched yet. so if I can help. People are thinking, wow, he's really slow this time. But yeah, if you follow the money, it's like an investigation, right? If not so much follow the money, but if you start pulling on those threads around budgets, or it's like with an investigation and asset tracing, getting bank records is absolutely key if you can, legally get them during the course of an investigation. But with military operations, oftentimes those budgets for the most interesting projects and operational elements get buried into something else, right? That's just the way it works, right? And so that's where you
maintain secrecy.
To maintain secrecy, but that's it's so it's an exercise, and we don't obviously with Black Files we don't identify anything that's currently classified because we'd all end up in the who's gal, but we're looking at some pretty interesting things, and it speaks to where programs are going currently, right? You look at some things in the recent past and you say, okay, this is where this new development is heading.
And isn't it? It's an interesting conversation too, because for people that don't like secrecy and they don't think we should have secrecy, for national security and for the development of things, like the stealth bomb or like a lot of other things that show that we have military superiority over our enemies, it's important to have secrecy.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. You can't function as a secure and safe and lasting republic without it, right? There's just no way. Now, people will say, "Oh, we should have transparency around everything." No, you got to draw the line. You got to you want to not overdo it, right? So you want to.
That's where I was going to get to.
Right, but
the overdo it part.
But you've got to have the ability to protect sources and methods. You've got to have a sort of a need to know policy around certain things, right, within national security concerns and the intelligence community. But yeah, again, it can be used as a weapon. You can overdo it. But
if you don't have security, you don't have the Manhattan Project.
Right. No, absolutely. Yeah. We don't. I mean,
you don't have many things. That
you think about
keep us safe.
You think about. China. Look at this. Now I'm deep into the show, and I'm just now bashing China for their theft of economic intelligence. But you look at the effort that they make in terms of stealing our intellectual property and research and development. Right? I mean, the idea that you don't protect your most critical information, whether it's operationally important or whether it's just again R&D for development of materials, and that speaks to the strength of your economy and. So yes, certain things have to be kept secret. But again, you can overclassify things, which tends to happen, right? You tend to just because you're trying to protect everything, right? So I'm just going to overclassify, and that also creates a problem then. So, trying to strike a balance, it's a human endeavor, so you never really get it right, I don't think. But
well, this is where people feel like the line when it comes to alien spacecrafts, and if the government knows and is aware of alien spacecrafts and alien technology, this is where the line of secrecy and being sworn to oath where it crosses over into a need to know for the general public. Bob Lazar's story, the story about him working for S4. He was a physicist for Los Alamos Labs. That's been proven. He was on the employee list there. He also was listed in a newspaper article when he put a jet engine in a Honda. That he was a physicist at Los Alamos Labs, and he was a propulsion expert. Says he worked for Area S4, and says he was hired to back engineer UFOs, and says they never could figure out how these things worked, and that they were never going to because they really couldn't, because they were trying to keep everything secret. They couldn't share all this information with the general scientific community. And he's like, science doesn't work in these containment bubbles. You can't compartmentalize science and have only a few small propulsion experts sit around and try to figure this thing out, and then they fire them, bring new guys in, and no one ever gets it.
Right, which is what you can use against. I mean, if I'm trying to pull information out of another nation, right? If I'm targeting intelligence from, they're developing some new ballistic missile system or whatever it is, propulsion system, then yes, I'm gonna play off of that desire on the part of engineers and scientists to have a collaborative community, right? And the Chinese do that very well, right? And particularly when they target Chinese Americans working here in the U.S. in potentially sensitive positions. This idea that we're all working together, and this is just what we should be doing. We've done. My company has done work trying to protect information for companies, pharmaceutical companies is a good example, where the scientists, the engineers, the doctors need that free flow in their mind. They got to have this free flow and this collaborating and this sharing of information. And meanwhile, you got the other side, where the bean counters and security personnel and all that, and they're going like, no, this is the lifeblood of our company. We can't risk losing this information, so we got to lock it down to the degree we can. Those two things don't necessarily coexist all that well together, but you got to try to find some medium. So, I think, there's the fact that the government came out and talked about ATIP. I thought it was a big step, right? That's a big deal for them, right? I mean, that they would discuss that. Do I think that they're hiding? Again, I don't take anything. I wouldn't take anything off the table, right? Frankly, because I don't know, right? So it would be stupid of me to say no. They definitely aren't holding on to some propulsion system that isn't of this world or whatever. If I don't know it, I can't say absolutely not. But
wouldn't you want to know though?
Oh, sure, yeah. But how? What do you do? I mean, you
grease a few palms.
Is that it? Yeah.
Get in there.
Yeah.
I want to see it.
Yeah, I guess you could do that.
I'd let the government know right now. Listen.
Yeah.
I'll say a lot of shit that's not true. Just get me to the UFOs. Show me the UFOs, and I'll lie.
Oh gosh, yeah. No, we're doing. It is.
It's not true.
Yeah, it's.
I'm lying. I'm telling you right now. Don't tell me.
No.
I'm lying. Because
Yeah.
if you tell me, I'm telling everybody.
He's telling everybody. Yeah.
That's a lie.
Look, they know that.
I'm sure they know that.
They know that. They're writing it down right now. Whatever happens. But
it's too bad. George, I think that you're probably like one of the most important figures when it comes to journalism in UFOs. And when you broke the Bob Lazar story, is that 89? When was that?
1989.
1989, I remember reading about it. I remember hearing about it. I remember watching clips on television and watching countless Bob Lazar interviews. It all came out of you. I mean, did you think at that time, what was your thoughts about UFOs before you had met Bob Lazar, and how much did it change while you got to know him and hear his story?
It changed quite a bit. I had not really given it much thought at all. Probably the same level of curiosity as most people. You go about your life, you pay your bills, you go to work, you love your family, and it's always out there somewhere. Hey, I wonder what the deal is on that.
Right.
But had not really dwelled on it until it was a day in 1987. Into the studio comes a guy named John Lear. And I had heard sort of a little bit about him. His family was famous. His dad developed the Lear jet, the 8-track tape. John had run for the state senate, and he had a certain amount of credibility with our news organization, KLAS-TV, because he had helped us break a really big story. And the story was the stealth fighter, the F-117. He had told my boss, Ned Day, managing editor, about this amazing plane that was invisible to radar flying up in Tonopah in Area 51. We had an interest in Area 51, not UFO related, but Ned broke that story. It went national. So John Lear comes into the station one day with a stack of what turned out to be UFO documents. He plops them on Ned's desk and says, Ned, this is going to be the next biggest story, the biggest story in history. It's a UFO cover-up. Aliens are here. Technology's been recovered. Ned takes a look at it and says, I'm not doing this story. If it was true, I'd already know about it. This is crazy. Well, I'm eavesdropping, as I tend to do. I'm a curious person. So as he's going out, I said, Lear, let me take a look at this material. And I looked at it. I thought, well, this is kind of interesting. At the time, I was producing and hosting this little public affairs show, 30-minute interview show. It would air Sunday morning at 6 o'clock. Nobody watches it. It would be interviewing a city councilman, a county commissioner. What the heck? I'll put Lear on there. And I let him go. And he told me this big scenario about secret treaties with aliens and recovered technology and a giant cover-up. Some of the information sounded outrageous. Some of it seemed like it would be worth checking out. Suddenly, the phone starts ringing off the hook. I'm getting calls about people that, who was that guy? What was the deal on that UFO stuff? Is it real? I had him on again. 6 months later, the response was bigger. I had him on a third time with a guy named Bill Cooper. I regret that. And he told him an even more elaborate conspiracy.
He's the Behold the Pale Horse guy?
Yes.
Yeah, I read that book, and halfway through I was like, what in the fuck is this?
Yeah. He tied in the JFK assassination. And,
everything. Bases on the moon. Aliens are there right now.
He had this scenario where he had seen these documents when he was in the Navy, and he's going to tell the world about it, then he's going to go away. Well, every time he told the story, the documents got bigger and bigger, and anybody who criticized Bill Cooper became part of the secret government, including me. So we do this third show with Lear, and he hints that he knows a guy who might be going to work out at Area 51 and knows something about alien technology. That guy turns out to be Bob Lazar, but Lear didn't give me the name at that time. A couple months later, I am anchoring the 5 o'clock news on KLAS, and we have a nightly or evening interview segment, 5-minute segment, live interview. Our guest doesn't show up, and we're scrambling to find somebody to fill that hole. And I thought about Lear. So I called him up, not knowing what had been going on in Lazar's life or Lear's life. And I said, hey, is your that UFO guy you told me about, is he around? Would he do an interview? Just turned out that Bob had been through the ringer. A lot of stuff going on in his life. He felt threatened. And he said yes. We had to black out his face. We do this interview, and he spills the basics of the story. I worked out there at a place called S4. I saw 9 flying saucers in an underground base. This is technology that came from somewhere else. I'm in fear for my life. Holy cow, the phones start ringing off the hook. My news director comes rushing in, the station manager. Is that for real? What's the deal on that? And we realized we had touched the pulse of the public in a way that I didn't really understand. We arranged to go meet Bob Lazar, my news director, Bob Stodall, and I, that following weekend, and put him through a paces where we would ask him questions about his background and how he got the job. And we spent a couple hours with him, and we walked out of that meeting thinking, holy shit, what if this is true? This is really risky for us as journalists. It's risky for our personal reputations if it blows up in our faces and we do this story, and it would really damage the reputation of our news organization, which is KLAS is a jewel. It's always been a leader in Las Vegas, one of the best TV news operations in the country. We're putting a lot on the line. Well, look, we decide, let's take our time. Let's look into this guy's story. And then in order to understand Lazar, we'd have to look at the bigger picture of UFOs. So I started a cram course on ufology, and I read everything. And I spent 8 months like cramming for a final exam that never happened. I read everything. I interviewed people. That same year, MUFON had its international symposium in Las Vegas, and there all the world's UFO people came right to me. I got to interview them, traveled around, went to Los Alamos. Lazar took us into the lab. We took cameras in there. He walked us around, waving to people. We didn't even have to stop for security. Took us into the lab like it was a rabbit going through its own burrow. He knew his way around. We were allowed to take a camera in there. We put those stories together, put them on the air in November, and man, it just went through the roof. every night of this 9-part series, people got the audience got bigger, phones ringing off the hook, people calling, giving us information. Suddenly, it's on something called Paranet, which was sort of a precursor to the internet, and it was huge, and it changed my life for sure. I had no idea that there were so many people out there interested in the topic, and I was hooked. And I really got hooked on Lazar, not only because his story, personally, I was interested in him. We became friends. I saw what happened to him after that live interview, and in the 7.5 months before we went and I revealed his identity, people were really messing with him. I mean, you cannot convey what it was like, how weird it was then, breaking into his house, leaving the windows open, messing with things in his home, breaking into his car, leaving the doors and windows down, just messing with his head.
And you think that was the government that was doing that?
Yeah, I do. I think so. And then, so I had put out a call to people, hey, I want other people to come forward.
This was before his identity was revealed.
Yeah,
we should explain this.
I am actively seeking information from the public. If you ever worked at Area 51 or S4, you know anything about this, you're at Nellis Air Force Base, reach out to me. So I started getting calls, and 6 people right in a row who had talked to me on the phone and offered to give me information were visited right after the call. One of them was a guy who did tax returns for people at Nellis Air Force Base, and he had got to know these guys really well and got information about crashes. There was a guy who was a golf pro at Nellis who had gone on road trips with officers and told him about this weird stuff out at Area 51 that seemed to be from somewhere else. He gets visited and told to shut up. There was a lady who worked in the court system. A cop told me about her, and I talked to her on the phone, and she had worked at the court system, but before she had worked for a company called Holmes and Narber, which is a defense contractor. And she said she sat in as a stenographer in these meetings and heard these conversations between the government contractors and Air Force officials about crashed saucers. And they would, after the meeting, they take the tape out of the typewriter and destroy it and take all the notes. And she agreed to tell me this story. It was just a tiny piece of the story. The next day, she's visited by these 2 guys in suits. They tell her, look, you are still subject to your security clearance. I hope you know that. And then they said, we know you traveled to L.A. to see your daughter, and we know she comes here. It's a big desert out there. It'd be terrible if something happened to either one of you. This lady is scared shitless. She didn't make that stuff up. So 6 people who had offered to give me information on the phone, one right after another, get visited, and it made me mad. It also made me mad that dealing with, trying to fill in pieces of Bob Lazar's life. Now, I know there's some gaping holes. I know it better than anybody. I've had to deal with it for 31 years. But I always thought if he worked at Los Alamos in classified projects in a scientific or technical capacity, then it would make sense that he could get hired into a program like S4 as somebody who thinks outside the box. Despite personal shortcomings or whatever, they might bring somebody like him in to help them crack a problem that they hadn't been able to resolve themselves. So I focused on Los Alamos. I knew he had been there. I talked to people who remembered him from being there, but the lab kept telling me, no record of him. He's never here. And then I showed him, well, look, I've got the Los Alamos newspaper. It's a small town paper. There it is on the front page, a front page story. Bob Lazar, physicist, Mason facility, Los Alamos lab. It's a story about his jet car. Nope, still have no records of him. And then I found his name in the phone book from the era when he was there. He's in the lab phone book. He had been hired by a company called Kirkmeyer, which is a company that's a headhunter that fills positions at Los Alamos and places like that. So great, I'll reach out to Kirkmeyer. They said, yeah, we hired him. Yeah, we've got records. Can I get it? Can I get his employment records that would show where he went to school, whatever information you guys had? Yes. A couple weeks go by, nothing. Couple more weeks go by, I call him again, I start writing them. I've got a stack of letters that thick. It went on for 2.5 years, and finally, by the end of it, they said he was never here. We don't have any records. That pissed me off. It made me mad, and I think that is really what got me hooked in the story, is that I was being jacked around by government and national facilities like that.
We should explain the Los Alamos thing, because the Los Alamos thing coincided with him doing work at MIT, right? Is that correct?
That's how he's explained it to me. Yeah,
and the way he explained it to me, I don't think I'm at liberty to say what the project was, because the project, the way he was describing it, is essentially internationally illegal. like what they were working on. And that's one of the reasons why he was saying, he explained what the project was. It sounded very feasible, also very evil. And then it was basically a weapon. And then he said that this was the reason why there was no actual record of him studying at MIT. It wasn't important that he got a degree. It was important that he understand the technical specifications of what they were attempting to accomplish.
That's my understanding as well. Yeah. And, it's always been the most problematic part of his background. And it's where a lot of people in the Bob Lazar story, that's where they stop.
But the thing is, when you listen to him talk and when he describes things, it's very clear he's educated.
Oh, he's a brilliant guy.
Yeah.
But I had always told him, and Bob, you're my friend. I want to have a conversation with you about these claimed degrees, because I didn't believe that he'd ever sat down. In those days, you go to a college like MIT or Caltech and get a degree. You've got to take classes in something other than science. I could not imagine Bob Lazar taking an English lit class to save his life. But he is a brilliant guy. I'll give you an example. In April, COVID thing is raging. My wife and I are staying at home. We're getting packages delivered for food and things of that sort. I'm a little worried. They didn't know about contact, whether you can get it off of cardboard boxes or whatever. And I mentioned to Bob in a phone conversation, I'm thinking about buying one of these UV screener systems. He goes, wait a second, don't buy one. I think I've got the parts that I can make you one in my garage. And a week later, it arrives. This thing, he's got it in his garage, handmade, this big scanner with these UV things that works. He just whipped it up in his garage.
I'll remind you, you got the scanner. I got a laser gun.
Right.
You got a laser gun?
I did, man. It is super powerful. So it's like a handheld toy that he retrofitted with a superpower. So I'm like lighting shit on fire in my house.
So it looks like a handheld toy, but it's actually a real laser?
It's a toy with full noise, but he put a diode in there, and it's super powerful. Like it can light shit on fire. My wife hates that shit. So I got the laser gun.
You also got the flamethrower, though. Lazar made a flamethrower. This is before your buddy Elon made flamethrowers.
No comment on that.
Yeah, well,
it's a massive
he made one. Made a flamethrower.
Massive.
Yeah, he's obviously a very intelligent man.
Yeah.
When you listen to him talk, there's no bullshitting going on. When he talks about talks about undeniable, concrete things, when it comes to science, when it comes to elements, when it comes to propulsion systems, he clearly knows what he's talking about. And the really confusing thing for people that are detractors is he really hasn't changed his story in 31 years. It really is the same story. And that's really hard to do.